All right, diving in today into the world of Arthur C. Clarke. We've got a ton of biographical stuff here, it's really striking just how much this guy did. Like, way beyond just being a sci-fi writer.
Yeah, a real polymath.
He was into science writing, undersea exploration, all sorts of things. So our mission today is kind of uncover all that, see how far his impact really reached, and I think there are going to be some surprises along the way.
Absolutely. I think what's really amazing about Clarke is how much his influence goes beyond just storytelling. He was really engaged with the scientific community, making these predictions about the future that turned out to be shockingly accurate.
Right, and I think most people, when they hear Arthur C. Clarke, they think 2001, A Space Odyssey, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's the big one. But are you saying that's just scratching the surface?
Totally. I mean, that film is iconic, no question. But we're talking about a guy who was also a science writer, a futurist, an inventor, even a serious undersea explorer. He really earned that nickname, Prophet of the Space Age.
Okay, Prophet of the Space Age. So that suggests, like, a real deep passion for space travel, right? Was this something he got into later in life, or?
No, actually, it started super early. He joined the British Interplanetary Society back in 1934. Think about that. He was just a teenager. And this wasn't just a hobby for him. He was actively advocating for space exploration at a time when most people thought it was pure fantasy.
That's wild. I mean, it really shows how far ahead of his time he was. But okay, so he's passionate about space, but how does that translate into real-world impact? Is he just writing about it, or is he actually involved in shaping the future of technology?
Oh, he was definitely involved in shaping the future. Back in 1945, he proposed this concept of geostationary satellite communication. Might sound a little technical, but think about it. This is the basis for satellite TV, GPS navigation, global communication networks, all of that.
Oh, wow.
He was envisioning all this decades before it became a reality.
So he's not just writing mind-bending sci-fi. He's literally laying the groundwork for technologies that would transform the world. That's huge.
Yes, it's hard to overstate how significant that is. And his influence goes even further. His nonfiction work was so compelling, so well-researched, that even Wernher von Braun, the rocket scientist behind the Saturn V rocket, used Clarke's writing to convince President Kennedy that a moon landing was possible.
Seriously. So you're talking about Clarke's ideas inspiring other brilliant minds and then actually contributing to one of humanity's greatest achievements.
Amazing, great.
This chain of influence is mind-blowing.
It really speaks to the power of his vision. And this visionary thinking wasn't just limited to space. You mentioned his passion for undersea exploration. Well, in 1956, he moved to Sri Lanka. And this place became his home for the rest of his life. And it was there, while he was scuba diving off the coast, that he made this remarkable discovery.
I remember reading something about ancient temple ruins. Did he actually find those while diving?
He did. While exploring the waters around Sri Lanka, he stumbled upon the ruins of this ancient coniform temple. It was a huge archaeological find. And it just shows you another side of this guy. We think of Clarke as this giant of science fiction, but he was also this real-life adventurer, always eager to explore the unknown, whether it was the depths of space or under the waves.
It's so fascinating how all these passions came together in his life. Science, exploration, storytelling. And this discovery led him to write The Reefs of Taprobane, right? His second diving book, which just shows he could excel in so many different genres.
Exactly. His talents weren't just limited to one field. But let's go back to his impact on science fiction for a second. He was, after all, part of the legendary Big Three, alongside Isaac Asimov and Robert Heinlein. These names are practically royalty in the sci-fi world.
Oh yeah, I've definitely heard of them. But for those who might not be familiar, can you explain what made these three authors so significant? Like, what set them apart?
Well, they were all incredibly prolific and influential writers who really shaped the genre of science fiction in the mid-20th century. They each had their own style and focus, of course, but they all shared this commitment to exploring complex scientific and philosophical ideas within their stories.
Yeah.
They weren't just writing escapist adventures. They were grappling with the big questions about humanity, technology, our place in the universe.
So they elevated science fiction beyond just entertainment. They gave it this depth and intellectual weight that still resonates today.
Exactly. And their relationship with each other was interesting, too. There's this famous anecdote about the Clarke-Asimov treaty. Apparently, when asked who was the better writer, they would jokingly defer to each other. Clarke saying Asimov was the best at science writing, and Asimov insisting that Clarke was the better science fiction author.
I love that. It shows their mutual respect and, their sense of humor.
Yeah, it's a great story.
But it also highlights their individual strengths. So, focusing on Clarke, What were some of the themes he kept returning to in his work? What were the big ideas that fascinated him?
Well, one of the most prominent themes is this optimistic view of technology's potential.
Hmm.
He truly believed in humanity's ability to achieve great things through scientific advancement. But it wasn't just technology for its own sake. He was really interested in exploring humanity's place in the universe, our potential for growth, the possibility of encountering other intelligent life forms. These ideas are woven throughout his work.
And that definitely comes through in 2001, A Space Odyssey. But speaking of that masterpiece, we should probably clarify that it's not just one film, right? There's a whole series to explore beyond that initial cinematic experience.
Oh, absolutely. The Space Odyssey series goes way beyond that first encounter with the monolith.
Yeah.
And the making of that first film is a fascinating story in itself. The collaboration between Clarke and Stanley Kubrick, the novel being written alongside the film, the differences between the two versions, it's all worth exploring.
It sounds like there's a ton of material there for fans to dig into. And for those looking to go beyond the Space Odyssey series, what would you recommend?
Rendezvous with Rama is a great one. It captures that same sense of wonder and exploration that Clarke is known for. And there's actually been talk of adapting it for film, which would be amazing.
Oh, wow. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, it'd be incredible. But even beyond specific titles, what's crucial to understand about Clarke is that he wasn't just a storyteller. He was a futurist. He was looking ahead and making these predictions that turned out to be incredibly accurate.
Okay, give us some examples. What kind of predictions are we talking about?
Well, we already talked about satellite TV. That's a big one. But he also envisioned these personal transceivers, devices that sound a lot like the smartphones we use today. And even more remarkably, he predicted global computer networks, essentially describing the internet decades before it existed. There's even this BBC presentation from 1964, where he's talking about remote information access and even remote surgery. These concepts that seem so prescient now.
It's like he was writing a blueprint for the future. It's incredible to think how much of our world today is built on ideas that he had so long ago.
Yeah, it's really remarkable.
But of course, every deep dive needs to look at the person behind the work, right? What can you tell us about Clarke's personal life? Where did this brilliant mind come from?
Well, his move to Sri Lanka wasn't just about diving. He really embraced life there, eventually becoming a Sri Lankan citizen. He faced some challenges, dealing with post-polio syndrome in his later years, but he never let it dampen his spirit. He was even knighted in 2000, although there was some controversy around that.
Oh, right. I remember hearing about that.
But maybe we can save that for later. The main thing to understand is that this larger-than-life figure, this visionary who seemed to have one foot in the future, was also a real person, with a rich personal life and a deep connection to the place he called home.
That's a great point. And I'm definitely curious to hear more about that knighthood controversy later. But for now, I'm really intrigued by this idea of Clarke as both a scientific mind and someone who was drawn to the mysteries of the unknown. You mentioned his interest in the paranormal earlier. How did that fit into his overall worldview? Did he believe in anything beyond the scientific realm?
That's a fascinating aspect of his life. Early on, he was quite interested in the paranormal, even admitting that it influenced some of his early writing. But as he delved deeper and investigated these claims more rigorously, he became increasingly skeptical. By the time of his later biographies, he described himself as an almost total skeptic.
So, a man of science through and through. Does that mean he completely dismissed the possibility of anything unexplainable?
It's not quite that simple.
No.
Even in his skepticism, there's this sense of wonder, this awe at the vastness of the universe and the mysteries it holds. He actually categorized mysteries into three types. He called them mysteries of the first kind, which are phenomena that were once baffling, but now we understand them, like rainbows, for example.
Okay, interesting.
Then there are mysteries of the second kind, things we don't fully understand yet, but we might solve them with future scientific advancements.
All right, I think I see where this is going. Mysteries of the third kind would be.
Exactly. Mysteries of the third kind are things we have no understanding of. Clarke acknowledged that there are things out there beyond our current comprehension. And that openness to the unknown, that willingness to acknowledge the limits of our knowledge, it's a recurring theme in his work.
That's fascinating. It suggests this really nuanced view of the world, right? A balance between scientific rigor and recognizing that there might be more out there than we can grasp.
Exactly. He was ultimately an atheist, but even in his atheism, there's this sense of wonder, a respect for the unknown, that almost echoes some spiritual sentiments. It's this complex, multifaceted perspective that makes him so compelling.
Well, you've definitely piqued my interest. I'm already feeling inspired to dive into more of Clarke's work beyond 2001. And it sounds like there's still so much more to uncover about this extraordinary man.
There is. In our next segment, we'll explore those intriguing details about his personal life, his relationships, his views on a range of topics. Get ready for some surprises because Arthur C. Clarke was full of them.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to it.
So, ready to continue exploring Arthur C. Clarke's life?
Definitely. Last time we were talking about Clarke's skepticism of the paranormal, but didn't he also host those TV shows about, like, mysterious phenomena? That seems kind of contradictory.
It does, doesn't it? He hosted a few popular shows like Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World, World of Strange Powers, Mysterious Universe. They explored all sorts of stuff, UFO sightings, ancient mysteries like Stonehenge.
So how does that square with his, scientific skepticism? Was he trying to debunk those claims or?
Not necessarily. Clarke was always driven by curiosity. Even if he remained unconvinced by a lot of the claims, he approached things with a scientific mindset, always looking for rational explanations, encouraging viewers to think critically about the evidence.
So not setting out to prove or disprove anything, but to explore the unknown with an open mind and a healthy skepticism.
Exactly. And remember those three categories of mysteries we talked about? He applied that to the shows too. Was it something we already understand? Could it be solved with future science? Or is it truly beyond us?
That's a really cool approach. Acknowledges what we don't know, but still pushes us to question and investigate.
Precisely. And that curiosity is what makes his work so enduring. Speaking of his work, we've talked a lot about predictions, his influence on tech, but not so much about his writing style or the themes in his fiction.
You're right. What made Clarke stand out from other sci-fi authors? What was unique about his work?
One key thing is his focus on hard science fiction. For those who don't know the term, it means his stories are grounded in real science. Plausible tech advancements, not just wild ideas for entertainment. He was building on what we know to create believable visions of the future.
So even when it's aliens and distant planets, there's this realism, a connection to the laws of physics that makes it hit harder.
Exactly. And his writing is very clear, precise. He could explain complicated science in a way anyone could understand without dumbing it down.
Makes sense. But it wasn't just technical stuff, right? His stories also dealt with philosophy, even spirituality.
Absolutely. One recurring theme that I find fascinating is this idea that humanity evolves to near godliness, a transcendence beyond our limits. He explores this in Childhood Zen, for example.
Whoa, that's a big concept. Was that just a plot device or something he believed?
More than a device, I think. Clarke was influenced by Olaf Stapledon, another writer who explored similar ideas. Stapledon's book, Last and First Men, had a huge impact on him. It shaped how he saw humanity's potential, this evolution toward cosmic consciousness.
So this transcendence thing wasn't just in the stories, it was a core belief.
Exactly. And it ties into his optimism about tech. For Clarke, science and tech weren't just gadgets. They were tools to unlock our potential.
To push the boundaries of what it means to be human.
Right.
Which brings us back to 2001. That image of the star child, born from our encounter with the alien tech.
Exactly. This powerful visual of Clarke's vision for us, transcending our limits, becoming something greater. And again, 2001 wasn't just a film, it kicked off a whole series, exploring evolution, technology, our place in the cosmos.
Right, you've got 2010, 2061, and 3001, the final odyssey, each one taking us further into Clarke's imagination. What do those later books add? Just rehashing the same ideas, or is there something new?
Definitely new stuff. In 2010, we go back to the discovery, learn more about the monoliths and their purpose. 2061 takes us to Halley's Comet, explores the idea of life on Europa, a moon of Jupiter. And 3001 shows us the ultimate result of meeting the alien, spanning thousands of years.
Sounds like an epic journey through time and space. But amidst all these huge ideas, did Clarke ever lose sight of the human element, the personal stories, the everyday stuff, alongside the cosmic stuff?
Absolutely. He's known for the grand scale, but he also captured the human element, the relationships that make his characters relatable. Like in The Fountains of Paradise, he tells the story of building a space elevator. Super futuristic concept, right? But he focuses on the engineer leading the project, his struggles, his triumphs, his relationships, grounding this amazing feat in human experience.
That's a great example. Reminds us that even in the craziest settings, it's the human element that we connect with.
Exactly. And I think that's why Clarke's work still resonates today. He blended big ideas with relatable characters, stories that are both smart and engaging.
Well said. But before we get too lost in the future, let's go back to some other parts of Clarke's life. We talked about diving, his adventures in Sri Lanka, but you said there's more to uncover.
There is. Next time, we'll dive into Clarke's personal life, his relationships, his views on all sorts of things, from politics to the environment. Get ready for some surprises, folks. Arthur C. Clarke was full of them.
All right, welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Arthur C. Clarke. We've covered his sci-fi, his predictions about the future, even his interest in the mysteries of the unknown. But there's still a lot to uncover about the man himself.
There is, definitely. Arthur C. Clarke wasn't just this brilliant mind. He was a really complex, fascinating person with a whole personal life, a range of interests outside science and sci-fi.
So let's start with that personal life. We know he moved to Sri Lanka in '56, and he clearly loved the place. But what was it about Sri Lanka that really captivated him? Was it just the warm climate, the ocean for diving, or something more?
Well, the climate and the ocean definitely played a role, especially for a diver like Clarke. But there was more to it than that. He often talked about how the culture, the people, the slower pace of life in Sri Lanka really resonated with him. He seemed to find a real sense of belonging there, a place where he could be himself, pursue his passions, without all the distractions of fame.
It's interesting you mentioned fame, because he did achieve global recognition for his work, but he still chose to live this relatively quiet life in Sri Lanka. It shows a real humility, a groundedness. That's pretty refreshing, especially for someone who accomplished so much.
I agree. Despite all his achievements, he never seemed to let fame go to his head. He stayed grounded, focused on his writing, his exploration, his learning, and that down-to-earth quality comes through in his writing too. Even when he's dealing with complex science or big philosophical questions, there's often this playful humor in his stories, like he never took himself too seriously.
We talked earlier about the controversy with his knighthood back in 2000. Can you tell us a bit more about that? What exactly happened?
Right, so just before he was supposed to be knighted, there were these accusations made against him. But they were investigated really thoroughly and found to be completely baseless. The police even issued a formal apology to Clarke.
It's awful that such a big moment for him was overshadowed by that. But it's important to say he was totally cleared. His reputation wasn't damaged at all.
Absolutely. And despite how stressful that whole thing must have been, Clarke handled it with a lot of grace and dignity. He chose not to sue for defamation. He just wanted to clear his name and move on. It says a lot about his character.
It really does. Shifting gears a bit, we've talked about his views on religion, the paranormal. But what about his politics? Did he ever express strong opinions on political matters?
He did. Clarke was a big advocate for peace and international cooperation. He really believed in the power of science and technology to solve global problems, to bring humanity together across borders and ideologies.
That seems to fit with his optimistic view of the future, right? He saw science and tech as bridges, not weapons.
Yeah, exactly. He was especially critical of nationalism, the idea of countries claiming parts of space. He famously said, "There is hopeful symbolism in the fact that flags do not wave in a vacuum."
That's such a great quote. It perfectly sums up his belief in the unity of humanity.
It really does.
And that forward thinking wasn't just about space. He was also really concerned about the environment, the need for sustainability here on Earth.
Right.
Did he ever talk about climate change specifically? It's such a pressing issue now.
He did. He was worried about our reliance on fossil fuels and advocated for switching to clean energy. He saw climate change as this huge threat that needed global cooperation to address.
It's amazing how his vision of the future wasn't just about tech, but also about taking care of our planet, thinking about future generations.
It shows how deeply he thought about these things, and all his concerns, his passions came from his belief in humanity's potential. He believed we could overcome these challenges or limitations to create a better future for everyone.
That's a really powerful message. I want to thank you for sharing your insights with us and for guiding us through the life and work of Arthur C. Clarke. It's been an amazing journey.
It's been my pleasure. Arthur C. Clarke's life and work have so much to offer, and I encourage everyone listening to explore his books, his stories, his ideas. He was a true visionary who helped us imagine what tomorrow could be and to believe in our ability to make it happen.
And who knows, maybe some of those possibilities will be our reality sooner than we think. Thanks to everyone for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Arthur C. Clarke. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep looking up at the stars as well.